Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to move forward. So welcome to using the department systems for fiscal management. As you know, you are a grantee for 21st Century for the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant. We expect a level of accountability. I do not want to use clients often because just keep in mind, we're here to help. We're here to make sure that you utilize the funds that you receive.
Mandatory one.
Please, everyone, mute your lines. Mark, if there's a way for us to
enter the wrong one?
Gwen, I think mute your button. At the very bottom of your Zoom, there are features. So if your microphone is unmuted, is muted.
In Old Brooklyn, we had a parent that picked.
I'm going to unmute mine because thank you, Mark, for muting all.
Oh, sorry, Nina.
But it muted again. Okay. All right. Cool. Because time is of the essence here. So just keep in mind, we here at the department is here to help you. We're not here to say, gotcha. We're here to equip you to maintain your grant in compliance with the state and federal rules, guidelines, and laws. So my name is Nina Pace, not Nina, Nina Pace, and I'm a financial program manager in the Office of Federal Programs. I have been assigned to the 21st Century Grant. So I mainly work with competitive grants to ensure that all grantees understand and use the systems to comply with the federal state guidelines. So today, my purpose is to make sure that you understand how to manage your 21st Century Grant. Next slide. All right, so one viable thing is in accessing our systems, you have to have a valid OHID account. That account was formerly named SAFE, okay? The OHID account is created first in order for you to be able to access any systems based on your SAFE account and assigned roles in the Ohio Educational Directory System. So with that, when you start out, especially for you new grantees, when you create your OHID account, there's a twofold process. You have to first create the account utilizing your driver's license, and you have to complete the process by matching the Department of Education profile. And that's very important. Otherwise, the organization that you are supporting can't assign a role to you. Okay. As I mentioned, that OHID account is a portal. It's a platform that was created a couple of years ago that replaced the SAFE accounts. So with that, the goal is to create one simple, secure portal to access into business with the Department of Education. Okay, there's some other things now that are taking place to enhance primary system, which is the CCIP, that is forthcoming, and that's called EdSteps. And most local education agencies have been testing and part of that process. Next. So when you receive this resource, if you do not have an OHID account and you need one, there's a link here to follow the instructions and follow the process to complete your OHID account. Next. Here is a snapshot of what that OHID account looks like. Since you're not an employee of the Department of Education, you will not click the right side for My Ohio profile. You would go in directly through the OHID portal. Next slide. Okay, so that's just the blow up of what it looks like. Okay, next. Sites and applications. Okay, so one key thing that I think you all heard me say is OEDS. OEDS is the Ohio Educational Directory System. So if I ever say OEDS, I'm talking and speaking of the directory system for Ohio Department of Education. This is where personnel roles are assigned. So if you want to access our systems, you will have to have a role in OEDS for your organization. Some of you represent multiple organizations. So that means you have to have the roles assigned for each individual organization to access the system. And for the CCIP for once, that's the main system that you will utilize to manage your grant. And that's where you receive your award notification and so forth. So let's go to the next slide because I want to stay within my time frame. Next is the monitoring system. So in addition to just fiscal reviews, this is where your CAPAs, and Charmaine's going to go into detail with that later. This is where that system is used for your compliance assessments. CORE, I'm going to talk to you of how you use CORE. It is viable for those that are responsible for hiring staff, especially if you're hiring your certified teacher. CORE is the venue in the system that you can use to ensure that they have a proper license. Next. All right, so all those systems that I've just mentioned on these next couple of slides are just screenshots of what the app looks like in OHID, in your OHID portal when you log in. So the CCIP basically will say planning on your end. It'll show you the planning and grants management system. Monitoring is the system that we will utilize, that you will utilize for your CAPAs. OEDS is the directory system. This is where you are assigned a role for your organization in order for you to have access to these other systems. Next. STARS, okay. So STARS is a system that was previously used by the 21st Century Program. It's still used by other offices within the agency, but not for registration, especially since COSA is involved, and they do an awesome job at registration. So CORE, and this is what the CORE app looks like. Next. Okay, so let's talk about the CCIP. Since the CCIP is the primary system, let's go to the next slide. I'm gonna rush through these, but up a little bit because I can't see the entire, well, upwards because they have half a, okay, there we go. All right, so the CCIP, what will happen in the CCIP? The approved application. So for you new grantees, you receive your award notification through a CCIP history log. Typically, the notifications in the CCIP goes to your treasurer, your superintendent, who is the authorized representative for the organization, and the grant contact. And we'll talk about that here shortly, because the grant contact in the CCIP should always be the 21st Century Program Manager. But in addition to the 21st Century Program Manager role assigned, you have to have data entry funding. That's the only way that your name will populate in the CCIP for a contact. So we'll go through that here shortly. Because I am talking quickly, if you have any questions later on in regard to what roles you'll be able to review the recorded session. Okay, so you receive your award notifications via the CCIP, and as a continuation grant, you will receive a notification annually to say that your award notification for your continuation grant has been approved. Second, program revisions, budget revisions, and uploads, okay? So these are different assignments and actions that you will take in the CCIP. So first, program revisions. They have changed a bit. because most of the program revisions are not required in the CCIP. And I'll go through budget revisions, that process, and uploads. Also, annually, during the competitive grant period, you as a current grantee that's continuing your grant cycle is responsible every year for going into the CCIP during that time period and complete your continuation plan. Okay, also, in order for you to download any funding for your grant, you have to submit project cash requests. Those are, and we call them PCRs, but that's also through the CCIP as well. Otherwise, do not expect for the department to just flow money out to you. You have to initiate any request via the CCIP. Also in the CCIP is the final expenditure report. That final expenditure report is an annual year-end report of all your expenditures, and it goes directly, you submit that in the CCIP, and it's actually monitored by our Office of Grants Management. So I do not get involved with the PCRs and the FER process. You have another office that you deal with in regard to the PCR or FER process. Okay, but I can answer basic questions. Next slide. And Charmaine, if you could, give me an indicator that I'm 15 minutes from my stop time so I can be cognitive of where we are.
Absolutely, will do.
Okay, next, reviewing approved plan. Why do I put that out there? In order for you to physically manage your program, and from a fiscal component, please understand all aspects of your plan. So what do I mean? Your approved application for all you new grants that was approved in the CCIP during that competitive grant process, print that out, share it with all your program staff. Share it with your program staff, understand it, because that's what you are expected to implement. For you continuing grantees, your continuation plan every year, so you can understand this is what I need to implement. If you have some variations or things that you anticipate changing, absolutely be sure to input that information into a email to your 21st century consultant to say, hey, this is what I want to change, or this is what I want to do. Anything major from the approved plan that's in the CCIP, it requires the justification in the history log. Go through that here shortly. Next. Accessing CCIP. Okay, I'm going to use Columbus City as an example for now. How do you get to your application in the CCIP? Always make sure that you are in the correct fiscal year. On this particular slide, and this makes me believe this is not the correct PowerPoint for some reason, because I remember changing this. Yeah, I do believe there's another PowerPoint. So right now we're in fiscal year 2022. Okay, so keep that in mind. We're in fiscal year 2022. And as I begin to move forward, I'm going to email the correct PowerPoint because I do not believe this is the correct one. And I apologize, you guys. Yes, this is for 22. Give me about 20 seconds. Okay, all right. Well, I'm just gonna go with this one because it has similar information. Okay, so make sure you're in the correct fiscal year. Here it says 2021. We are in fiscal year 2022. It'll automatically populate to the current fiscal year. Okay, so 2022, make sure you're in 2022. Then you click on 21st century. That's how you can access your 21st century application. Next slide. All right. Okay, so this is like really small, but this is what you see when you click on 21st century. You automatically see a sections. Sections is always your portal in the CCIP. So it tells you one, the current application status. If you notice on this particular one, it says reviewed. Anytime you have a reviewed status, that means that you have been awarded a grant and you are able to download funds, okay? Underneath where it says change status to, that will let you know this is where I can change the status. These are my options. So since we're at the beginning of the fiscal year, it says revision started, okay? So that means you are about to start a revision or can. Otherwise, that means all year you haven't had a budget revision and that you're about to submit your FER and start the FER draft. So it tells you what you can change the status to. Next slide. Okay, so I've showed you how to get to the CCIP for the current fiscal year. Now, what are the expectations and the processes for when you get into the CCIP? Program revisions, budget revisions, and uploads. Next slide. Okay, so I just this is a great resource if you are in question as far as what status you are currently at. So on this next 2 pages, it kind of tell you what a definition of what status change is, okay? I'm not gonna go through that, but use it as a resource. So if you're ever unsure of where you are from that sections page or what it means for the next status change, this is a great resource. So this is page 1, and then the next page down is page 2. And it also tells you the processes for approval, the CCIP fiscal representative and CCIP authorized representative. Those are the 2 final approval stages in the CCIP and are very important. Next slide. All right, now, when do you submit a program revision? So as I want to share in regard to, this cannot be the right slide. Okay, program revisions. Let's go to the next slide. This is not, so for a program revision, you as the subrecipient must enter in the CCIP history log a justification for the program revision. For a program revision, you do not change the status, okay, at all. A program revision, no status changes. Status changes is only for a budget revision and when you are taking an additional action. Next slide. All right, program approval. So with the program revisions, just keep in mind, the approvals are through your 21st century regional consultant, okay? So any program revision, they review, they approve. And again, there's no status change. Next slide. So how do I enter a program revision? Thanks for asking. With a program revision, you go to the sections page and click on history log, but add comment. So when you create the comment, this is what you see. What I want you to take away from this slide is, 1, you enter the comment, you enter your revision. Always use spell check. Spell check feature is available. Then under where it says district contact, you want to make sure that you choose 21st century and then click the box to the right, 21st century, and add. Under district contacts, that's for us. Under ODE contacts, please make sure that you click ODE consultant and add before you send the program revision. Okay, next slide. A budget revision. What is a budget revision? So you all have been approved, your budgets have been approved during the award period, and during the continuation review process by your regional consultant. Okay, so if you anticipate some sort of change in your budget, the current approved budget, it requires a budget revision. Okay, so any anticipated expenditures that you want to include that's not in the previous approval, you have to make sure that that's approved prior to spending. Okay, so a budget revision does require a status change. So when you go to your sections page, you have to change the status to revision started. And I'll show you here in just a second. If that budget revision changes or exceeds 10% within an object code in the budget, it requires a justification. It requires the rationale for your change. Next slide. Okay, so like I said before, when it comes to this money, when you make changes, make sure that it's approved prior to spending and it still meets federal requirements for the allowable use of funds for 21st century. Okay, go to the next page. So like I said, a budget revision is 10% over the object code that requires a rationale or justification, and that is through the history log. Next page. Okay, also before you can spend, it has to be approved by our office. Okay, approval means it will change the status to consultant approved. Next slide. Okay, so let's say Graham Local School submitted a budget revision. They included in their in the CCIP history log their rationale for the purchase. They sent the notification. It was reviewed and approved. So remember I said the status will be consultant approved. That means I've reviewed the revision. It meets the allowable use of funds. And at that point, when you see consultant approved, you can spend according to your anticipated revision. Next page. So again, to just kind of give your overview, when should you initiate a budget revision? And this is very important because I get questions all year round about why or when should I do a budget revision? So that means that you have on your end strategically planned and reviewed the current budget to determine your program needs moving forward. When you monitor your funds, you're looking at that current budget, okay, to see if there's something that's needed and to change, okay? Third, you determine if the revision exceeds 10% within the object code, and that's going to determine if the rationale is required as a justification in the history log, okay? So with all that said, once those three things are done, then you initiate and start the budget revision in the CCIP, okay? And as I keep saying, do not spend until your revision status is at consultant approved. Next slide. If you have questions after this session and you want to do take our review our YouTube in regard to budget revisions, here's another resource available to you. Click on the link and you'll be able to be guided as far as what you do for a budget revision. Next slide. Okay, what else do we expect via the CCIP history log? I mean, in the CCIP, PCRs and FERs. Keep in mind, when it comes to you downloading your funds and you submitting your final report for expenditures for the year, this is monitored by our Office of Grants Management. I provide them the guidelines on allowable use of funds, but they actually process your request. Next slide. Also, someone wants to put the YouTube in the chat, but I'm not sure if that's doable. I know Charmaine worked magic.
I'm putting that in right now.
Thank you. I know she's magical with her hands, so she can do anything. Okay, anyway, so back to our session. So a PCR, what is a PCR? Project cash request. This is how you download your grant funds, We do not automatically send them out. So it's up to you. And it is based on the substantial approved date. So those requests so in your request that you submit, make sure that they have already been approved in your approved budget from the program office. Otherwise, they will reject your project cash request because what you're requesting was not already approved. Okay, so they have my back. Also, when you receive your funds from a project cash request, by law, now all those funds have to be expended within 5 days. So you also can submit multiple project cash requests as long as you do not have one currently pending. Next slide. So give you some tips.
Excuse me, really quick, you have about 15 minutes.
Great, thank you. On the project cash request, a couple tips. Keep in mind, it's for immediate cash need. Okay, so if you have a negative cash balance on hand, the treasurer, then certainly you need to move forward and submit that project cash request. You can, like I said, submit multiple requests within a month as long as the current PCR has been approved. You may only submit one active. Next slide. Final expenditure reports. This is another report that's due via the CCIP. This is an annual submission that's due by September 30th every year. Okay, so from June 30, when the fiscal year ends, you have 90 days to submit this project cash request. What does this mean? This means that you should liquidate, close out, pay out all your bills after June 30. If you have a summer program, that means you have a summer extension for salaries only. Okay, and I'll go through that here shortly. For salaries only. So that means you have to prior proper plan and purchase all the items you need for summer program before June 30. You already have it in your approved budget, so start now purchasing those items so you don't run into an issue. Your final expenditure report is your actual expenditures for that entire fiscal year. So that's from July 1st to June 30 of this current fiscal year, okay? 21st Century Grant does not have a carryover provision. So what does this mean? For the last 2 fiscal years, we have allowed carryover due to the current pandemic we're in. This is not expected to continue. So I have to let you know, after this fiscal year, we do not expect carryover. So spend your funds now, even the carryover funds that you just have from FY21 into 22. Next slide. Another system is monitoring. In order for you to successfully manage your grant, know these systems, okay? So monitoring, next slide. Monitoring is where the first year implementation phase takes place, your CAPA, and the grant closeout. So we will have the grant closeout this fiscal year. We haven't had one in 2 fiscal years. So this is the portal that you'll upload your evidence for CAPAs and for your first year and that grant closeout into the monitoring system. Next slide. So, like I said before, all evidence will be uploaded into the monitoring system. Charmaine is going to be working on providing you technical assistance and trainings for the new system. All evidence for first year implementation, grant closeout, and for your CAPAs are due December the 17th. So mark your calendar. The grant closeout, my apologies, the grant closeout evidence is for October the 4th. And that will be part of my session this afternoon where I'll give you details on that grant closeout. So CAPA first year documentation is due December the 17th of this year. Grant closeout October 4th of next year. Next slide, and Charmaine, let me know when I'm at 5 minutes. Grant closeout, for the grant cycle reviews. Again, this is a kind of a breakdown of what I just provided. The first year implementation is a fiscal review and desk review. CAPA, both program and fiscal. Grant closeout is fiscal. And you will have state and federal audit requirements from state auditors. So please do not ignore anything you receive from state auditors. at all. Okay, next slide. OADS is the system that I was sharing with you for assigning roles. So in order for you to access any of these systems, you have to have proper roles assigned. Next slide. All right, so go down a little bit so I can see the first thing on the list. Oh, I think go up. So is the CCIP authorized representative and superintendent the first? Okay, so the CCIP authorized representative, that is your superintendent. That is the CEO of your community-based organization. They have final sign-off and authority for any change that's done in a CCIP. The fiscal rep, that's the treasurer. They have second to final sign-off, okay? And the OEDSR administrator. You need an OEDSR administrator because that's the person locally that will assign roles for your organization, okay? There's only one person that can be assigned to all three of those roles. Next slide. Okay, on the next slide, it goes into the other 21st century roles that's needed. Data entry funding CCIP, that's the role. If you are accessing the CCIP, if you are completing your continuation plan, you need that role. If you're a program manager, you need that role, okay? You should be assigned the program manager and data entry funding because that data entry funding role is the person you can have as your contact for the organization. For 21st century program manager role, there's only one person that should be and can be assigned to that role. Only one person for a program manager. A new role that had been added a couple of years is the data entry 21st century role for 21st APR for that reporting system. Next. Okay, here it just gives you a definition of what those three primary roles are, and you can go to the next slide. And on the next slide, it gives you the definitions of the other roles that I just mentioned. Next. Core. If you are hiring, I know right now a lot of programs are having issues with hiring. So if you want to ensure, if you do not have a certified teacher hired and you want to ensure that that person, that paper they showed you, that they have a valid license with the state of Ohio, you want to check core. It gives you that information as well if it's valid, okay? Next slide. So as I mentioned, this is kind of a snapshot of what core looks like. It tells you the educator profile for an individual. If their license is valid or renewed, it should be renewed. Next slide. Okay, other tips. Let's go to the next slide. Other tips that I kind of want to talk about that you should know. Everyone should know the organization's IRN number. That's a 6-digit code that's assigned by the Department of Education for your organization. So for this training today, I know COSA did a very good job to list those organizations for you. But if you want to fiscally manage your grant successfully, know your IRN number. Know the name of your grant with the Department of Education. Know your grant number. Site location, that is another very important tool to have and to know, information to know. Next slide. When you are checking your systems, make sure that you and your treasurer understand the completion of those vendor forms, especially you new grantees. You have to make sure in order for your payment to successfully go through to your organization, you must have a DUNS number in our system. All of your Ohio Shared Services documents must be updated, otherwise your payment gets stopped or goes nowhere. Know and update your OEDS roles. All your roles for 21st century that I just mentioned, have your organization's OEDSR administrator go in to check and verify who is assigned to these roles. This is the time for you to do that. Make sure that you update your CCIP contact in the CCIP. That's important because otherwise the important person is not receiving the communication that's being sent out. So review all those and update those roles annually, or as you know, staff change, update the roles. Next slide. And as I said before, I see a message over to the side with Linda. You should only have one program manager per organization. It doesn't depend on grant. A program manager oversees all aspects of your grants, all grants for the organization. At least they're that point person with the state of Ohio. And then locally, if you have other managers that's working at the local level, that's fine. But in the Department of Education, OED system, it should only be one program manager. Okay, I'm gonna slide through these, breeze through these use of funds slides because all of us understand and know those allowable use of funds. And with federal funds, key points, when you're making decisions, think of reasonable and necessary in order to be allowable, okay? Is it reasonable? Is it necessary? Does the anticipated expenditure fall within the guidelines for 21st century use of funds? And make sure it make good common sense for your student population and families. Next slide. So here is our, like a couple of resources of allowable and examples of unallowable use of funds. Keep that in mind, review it, go through it, okay? But if you ever have any questions, I'm here to help, send me an email. I'll be more than happy. I answer individual requests all the time. Next slide. Okay, keep in mind when you're looking at your expenditures that you can't exceed 15% within for your governance and administration funds at all. Okay, you will receive a validation message in the CCIP and can't change the status because of it. Next slide. Thank you for putting in the link, Charmaine, the list of 21st century expenditures. Go back up to that next slide. Okay, all right, so here are other fiscal resources. Thank you. Next slide. So in your electronic PowerPoint, when you receive this, when you click on the underline name, it will take you to the actual guidance. So the 21st century non-regulatory guidance is phenomenal. It will be a great resource for you. In the CCIP document library, I've added a lot of 21st century resources. So you can click there if you want to see other fiscal resources. And please share this information with your treasurers. It is very important that they're up on these resources. And also on the 21st Century WordPlus blog, we have a fiscal resource page. Next slide. And here is a snapshot of what's currently in the CCIP under 21st century. So you see we've added a lot. It has the carryover information that we do not have a carryover provision. These are just unusual times which allowed us to be able to carry over for the last 2 years. It gives the flexibility waiver for the 21st century program and any other things that's relevant, and the partnership agreement. So if you go to that partnership agreement in the document library, if you're ever in question what your role is as a CBO or LEA, it's spelled out for you there. Next slide. So, ta-da, I've rushed through my presentation. I successfully made it through my slides without me getting the hack. So my name is Nina Kamen Pace. Ooh, I went back in time. That's my maiden name. Okay.
Way back.
Wow, I went way back. So Nina Pace, fiscal manager. I am a member of the operation, well, I was operations, but administration and analysis team with the Department of Education, Office of Federal Programs, but I primarily assist 21st century grants and other competitive grants through the agency. Reach out to me if necessary. Next slide. You are welcome to all. How long, or do I have enough time for questions, Charmaine?
Yes, you could, you have, I'll let you, because there are a couple questions in the chat, give you a few minutes. I'm good with time on that. So with that, there are a couple of questions. Dr. Shea from Springfield City put a question in the chat. How different is the 5-day time to spend on the cash expenditures from the past?
Okay, so in the past, there were no limitations. So I think for the past 3 years, the Office of Grants Management added a rule that once you receive funds, it must be spent within 5 days. This has been going on for 3 years now. So it's new for all grants. This was a federal compliance citing that they received. So in all their information, all the disclaimers, even in the CCIP when you receive your funds, it says you have to spend within 5 days. So basically it's on a cash needed basis. I hope that helps.
And then I think there's only one more question. Do staff salaries, this is from Karen Bullock, do staff salaries have to be paid hourly, or can we pay staff a flat fee per day worked?
So in Ohio, this is a local control state. So you have to adhere to your local policies. So please connect with your treasurer, because they're in your guidance in your that you have within your local threshold and other local policies. It talks about salaries. It talks about contracts. So it's up to you if it's by hourly or if it's by sessions. That's a local decision, but keep in mind, these are federal funds. So what's reasonable? What's necessary to retain your staff? How long from when a budget revision is submitted, is reviewed, and hopefully approved? Okay, so good question. So once you submit a budget revision, typically, okay, keep in mind, when you submit a budget revision, your status has to be at authorized representative approved in order for it to come to me, okay? And it comes to the department. So just because you click revision completed, you have 2 status changes to go. That's why it's very important to pay attention to the sections page in the CCIP, because it will tell you what your next status change is. So if you started revision, then it's changed to revision completed, then you have your fiscal rep approved, then you have your authorized representative approved, okay? So one at authorized representative approved, really, I have 48 hours to review and approve, or review and provide a response. Now, if I'm out of the office, that may vary, but I do have someone that backs me up when I'm out. So typically I would say you receive a response probably within hours up to 2 days. All right, anything else?
I think that is it, unless there's any other questions folks want to drop in the chat really quick.
But it has been my pleasure to support you. Just keep in mind, I'm always here to help. I'm always open and available to the 21st Century team. So whenever, I'm available to you too. They can answer most of the questions, but it's been my pleasure, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Nina.
Yes.
Appreciate that. I think there was one other question from Allison in the chat.
Okay.
Nina and I are going to switch. She's going to be addressing questions in the chat, as she is very well versed in 21st century programmatic and fiscal, even though she's our fiscal guru, I always say that. So I need a few seconds just to share my screen. And if for those that were asking, the attendance link has just been dropped in the chat. You may have to scroll up a little bit to see it. But again, we're going to jump into our next training shortly so that we can end on time by 12:15, so folks can have a break in between this session and the next session. So yes, so let me pull up my screen. And I'm because of how my notes are going to show up, I will not be able to see the chat. So I'm going to rely on you to, let me know what's going on.
I will let you know.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, Allison, there are no limits on budget revisions, but keep in mind, especially for new grants, we do not expect a lot of budget revisions, because that means that you are deviating from your approved awarded grant. Okay, that's what you were approved for. For continuation plans, we really don't expect a lot of revisions, but if I receive multiple revisions, I'm probably going to provide some technical assistance before I go to your regional consultant with concerns. Okay,
Awesome. Thank you, Nina.
I'm going to mute.
Okay, thank you. All righty. So let's go ahead and move on to the next part of this session. So again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 21st Century Compliance and Monitoring Overview and Updates session. And as you can see, I've opted to put in the subtitles for those that may need them as part of reviewing and getting information from this presentation. So I'm going to be talking very clearly so that my words come across the screen. You should have gotten access to this PowerPoint via the COSA event page on Eventbrite. And so you can follow along that way, or again, you can just use what's coming up on the screen. So with that, we're going to go ahead and move on. So I know there's a number of you that are new to 21st Century, either you've been awarded a new grant or your established organization has a new program manager. So to you, I say welcome. To our returning grantees, welcome back. My name is Charmaine Davis Bay, and I am your presenter for this training. I've been with the department for over 5 years, serving as an education program specialist, as mentioned a few times today. My primary role is to support and monitor grantees in the Northeast and Southwest regions as a 21st Century regional consultant. I also served in a number of roles at the department as the content expert for the following areas: 21st Century annual grant review process, the equitable services provision, which we're going to talk about a little bit today. I also oversee the development and maintenance of the monitoring application, which we're going to talk a little bit more about today. And I oversee the 21st Century External Community Partnership listing, which again, I will talk about today. Just a little bit about me, because I always like to share out, my connection to this work. I have been in the after school and out of school time space since 2013, coming from the field as a site coordinator from several programs, and I'm happy to start another fiscal year serving and supporting you all, our grantees, doing this most important and critical work of supporting our underprivileged at-risk youth and their families via equitable access to quality 21st century programming. During today's training, we're going to review several areas, including the importance of program partnerships, an overview of the equitable services provision or non-public consultation, and the importance of program sustainability. You'll also be provided an overview of 21st century compliance and monitoring requirements and additional program resources. Before we get started, as a reminder, please use the chat feature to share out your questions throughout the presentation, or use the raised hand feature so that Nina can inform me that you have a question verbally that you would like to share out. I would like, if possible, for those verbal questions to come towards the end, but if you have any questions during the training, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So with that, let's continue to move forward. So first, we're going to take a look at a few topics that are housed under grant requirements for compliance, specifically partnerships, equitable services, and program sustainability. So let's talk about making your partnership work. With this, you are going to, initially coming in as a grantee, you agree to conduct your programs in alignment with your stated set of assurances, which includes your signed partnership agreement with your identified primary partner, which should be signed and uploaded within the CCIP as part of your new application or continuation plan. All grantees and stakeholders hopefully have carefully read and understood these assurances before submitting your applications or continuation plans. Maintaining consistent and ongoing communication will create long-term and sustainable success. With partnerships, that involves, connecting with school leaders, administrators, and staff via discussions from the beginning of your grant cycle. That includes grant planning, awarding, and implementation. You're identifying expectations for the program in these partnership settings. You're making sure that your school leaders understand the purpose of the grant, which requires that all parties look at what's approved via your new application or your continuation plan, and understanding how your partners will be involved in providing support to you in the program. That communication is so important from the beginning through the duration of your grant cycle to make sure that everybody is on the same page with regards to these funds. Continuing on with the partnership conversation. So essentially, the grantee is responsible for developing key partnerships. You must have one key partner for grant eligibility, and you are also required to collaborate with at least one other additional partner outside of your primary partner. And again, this is most common when you, for example, are trying to implement components of programming like a STEM-based, project-based learning component. Most of our programs do partner outside of the district or CBO that has the grant and their primary partner to ensure that the needs of the students are being met in various ways. Partners establish linkages among federal, state, and local agencies to connect with other community resources for program students and their families, including social services, counseling, college and career services, just to name a few. As a reminder, you must have your primary partner in place for the entire duration of the grant. If there are any changes to that, you need to contact your regional consultant immediately so that we can have a discussion around next steps. Any dissolution of any kind, which includes this being after all attempts to resolve concerns around your grant are exhausted and documented, you will have to relinquish your grant back to the department, which may add your organization or district to the high-risk grantee list, which could affect your ability to receive funds in the future. And I always share this because this is as a last resort. We always want to provide support as necessary. Of course, we encourage you all on a local level to have these important conversations. But at the end of the day, if all else fails, if all attempts to create a sound partnership are exhausted, then the department will have no choice but to take next steps to resolve that issue. Talking about expanding your partnership list to meet programmatic needs, you're designating your needs based on who can help meet your program performance measures, which again are in your approved application or continuation plan, in which you all should be aware of. An example would be looking at your English reading data, seeing if it's because of its being decreased from year 1 to year 2. You may want to look at contacting a local writing center to improve those outcomes and providing a creative way to support your students. Looking at youth development and family engagement support, connect with your local faith-based organizations or your local YMCAs or Boys and Girls Clubs, which many are current grantees that are in this room, other organizations or school buildings that have wraparound supports. These are just examples of how you can expand your partnership listing. And we're also going to share how you can work with the department on that as well during that part of the presentation. And so to reiterate the importance of partnerships, they are truly your key to success. So again, because you're here, it's because you provided information that allowed us to see that your program will be effective and innovative to support the students and families in need in your community. So please utilize your partnerships. And speaking of partnerships, in accordance with Title IV, Part B of the 21st Century Community Learning Centers program of the Every Student Succeeds Act, the Ohio Department of Education, or department, is required to provide a list of pre-screened external organizations as described under Section 4023A11. To assist with current and future program planning, including the creation and submission of your FY23 continuation plans. I know we're like, oh my God, we're thinking about that now, but yes, as you start to think about next year and or any new applications you submit, the Department's Office for Improvement and Innovation has provided a list of pre-screened external organizations on its external community partnership listing. If you have this PowerPoint presentation in PDF, which was provided on COSA's event page, there is a hyperlink that will take you to the department's 21st Century webpage, where you can find on the top of the screen a box that houses our external community partnership listing information. And I'm actually really quickly I can't drop this right now, but we'll make sure to put that in the chat as well. But you can, if you go to the department's 21st Century webpage, You will find it on the top of the page. If you have any questions about the listing, please contact me directly offline, and you will be able to get my contact information at the end of this presentation. When we discuss partnerships as the Office for Improvement and Innovation, we are implored to connect our work strategies to create greater alignment for continuous improvement within the work of this program in regards to internal practices and of the department, with the goal of tying all of our work together. And Patty talked a little bit about this in her presentation this morning, for grantees to work more collaboratively together with their districts and to best serve students and their families. This graphic that you see on your screen depicts the Ohio Improvement Process, or OIP, which is viewed as an organizational strategy that we encourage districts to use as part of their continuous improvement efforts. This process gives districts a template through which focused and intentional action can take place. Similarly, we want to be intentional with how we support our grantees in utilizing a similar model to improve internal processes and procedures, which would then generate higher quality of support to our grantees. Through engagement with districts, CBOs, or community-based organizations, and other external stakeholders, you are identifying critical needs of your programs. In these meetings that you're having, you should be meeting to review data and research to discover best practices and strategies. And you're talking about planning, your planning phase, and having discussions around what you want to implement potentially within these new practices and procedures. Next, when you're implementing your plans and monitoring programming, you're engaging with key stakeholders to survey how those determined practices are impacting your funded programs. And finally, through evaluation, you should examine, reflect, and adjust as needed throughout the entire school year. And again, within the OIP or Ohio Improvement Process, partnerships are critical for success. And so I just wanted to provide some examples here of collaborative implementation teams that I know our districts on the line are aware of, but for those CBOs that are not familiar, as you're communicating with your primary partner, which should be an LEA, some of you are collaborating with traditional school districts. These are some of the groups that you should be working with in order to create success long-term for your programs. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about equitable services. Again, you all should be familiar with this because this was a requirement as part of your submission, your initial grant submission, grant application submission. But essentially, equitable services or equitable participation means, in regards to 21st Century, that your program provides before and after school activities, weekend, holiday, and summer services to students and their families. As a federal requirement under federal law, this provision states that all public schools or non-public schools or organizations awarded a grant must provide equitable services to non-public school students and their families who are in the area. This includes 21st Century sites and any feeder sites that send students to that program. Non-public school students' eligibility to participate is not based on low income status or Title I participation, but the need of that non-public school student. This is to ensure that your program is operating in fidelity across the board, mirroring what is offered to public students and non-public students as well. Per the provision, applicants are required to begin timely and meaningful consultation with applicable non-public schools during the initial design and development of their 21st Century program. This also goes into your continuation plan development, which should be occurring every fiscal year. Every year that you're funded with 21st Century funds, you should be doing this consultation. As of this month, there are no changes to the provision, which means that you're expected to, per your approved application or continuation plan, to continue consulting with eligible non-publics. For any communication that you send via mail or email, please be sure to reference this program throughout that document. And there is this should have been also in the resources that COSA provided on their event page, a copy of the FAQ document that we share every year. It looks a little different. Communications kind of jazz it up a bit, but it's pretty much the same information that you can use to guide your efforts in that space moving forward. And as a reminder, which I will talk about during this month's monitoring application trainings, you must keep documentation of this because this will be evidence that you will need to show at some point during your grant cycle. So please be mindful of that. A few key points that I wanted to reiterate: the local education agency, or LEA, is responsible for the provision. This is a traditional, typically a traditional school district, ESC, or charter school that our CBOs are partnered with, and vice versa. If you are a community-based organization, and that is the grantee, you should be working with your LEA to meet the provision. The correspondence you send out to eligible non-publics must be kept for documentation purposes, to be uploaded as part of your first year implementation and CAPA monitoring surveys. As programming needs grow, it's perfectly fine for districts to include an additional continuing grant to your ongoing consultations to be sure that proper communication and documentation is being disseminated to the proper non-publics during that time. Really quickly, just a reminder that the CBO partner, if you are LEA grantee, your CBO partner may handle the contact throughout this provision, but the provision, if it's not implemented correctly, the district partner will still be responsible. So again, it's important that you all work together to ensure that this communication is happening timely and in a meaningful fashion. The district knows with whom they are required to consult with during the non-public consultation. The districts are aware and work with the department through our Office of Federal Programs, through their non-public division. And so again, it's really important that you work together to ensure that our non-publics are being contacted correctly. If you have any questions about the provision and how 21st Century implements this, please contact me directly for assistance. Let's talk about program sustainability. 21st Century grants, as a reminder, are not intended to provide programs with long-term sustainability for their expanded learning and or out-of-school time programs. LEAs and CBOs need to work together to make critical links to sustaining 21st Century programs beyond the grant period. You should be working together with other community-based organizations or other identified partners to determine how to best leverage resources within the community for long-term continuation of this program. As partners, LEAs and CBOs should be making the consistent and conscious effort to work together to ensure that those necessary links are priority. As applicants, both entities should come together to leverage resources for the continuation of the program. And this must be stressed. All 21st Century programs are required to develop and fully implement a sustainability plan, focusing on maintaining programs throughout the grant cycle. This is meant to help start the program, but not fund the program on a continuing basis once the 5-year grant cycle is over. So essentially what that means is you should be prepared in the event that you fall off after year 5, and some of you all do reapply in hopes of getting funded again, but that's not guaranteed. So your sustainability plan should be set up so that it's showing your sustainability efforts through and beyond your grant cycle. And so to support this effort, we encourage you to, again, work with COSA and your regional mentors that you met earlier to assist with that, and to ensure that you are here beyond your 21st Century's 5-year grant cycle. And continue to move forward because there's a lot more. And so I'm going to also share some resources with you. Again, if you have the PDF of this presentation, that towards the end, there are links to all of these, and you can also find these on the blog under program, I believe it's the program monitoring page. So what we provided here was sustainability plan template, the sustainability plan worksheet, the program implementation checklist, and a document to help you create a program elevator pitch. Very useful if you're not familiar with creating a sustainability plan from scratch. So again, I encourage you to take a look at those links that are at the end of this presentation, or just go directly to the blog under program monitoring, and you'll find the links towards the end of that page as well. So normally I go through this, there's each bullet, but because of time, I want to just highlight that when you go through the sustainability plan template that's provided, here are the areas that are encompassed within that document. It encourages you to think about a program vision statement if you don't already have one. You should be putting that there to help guide your efforts with sustainability. You're providing information on your program background, your current and potential funding sources, sustainability results year to year, program elements to be sustained year to year, your partnerships, which you should have a list of and you're keeping track of throughout your grant cycle, and a time frame that allows you to show your action throughout this process. And here is what that looks like. And again, you can find this link at the end of this presentation or directly on the 21st Century blog under the program monitoring page. All right, so with that, we're going to ease out of that information and go into some updates with regards to the department's compliance tool and the compliance and monitoring tool. This is information that we will be collecting throughout your 5-year grant cycle, starting with your first year implementation phase, which Charlotte, or Char, we call her Char, has or will go through with you today in more detail. Again, as Shannon stated, during the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th year of your grant cycle, if you have not already had a CAPA on-site visit, you will be asked to provide additional documentation through that process through your CAPA, or compliance and performance assessment for short. And we're going to go through those sections so that you're familiar moving forward, especially for our new folks on the line. With regards to effective evidence-based practices, your programmatic efforts listed here should always reflect effective evidence-based practices, where research can show where your students can improve with the successful effectiveness of curriculum or programming you choose here. This comes with understanding your approved FY22 new application or continuation plan. And again, as another point of reference, for those first-year grantees that included innovative practices as part of your FY22 application, under the competitive priority section, you will be expected to adhere to those programmatic components as reviewed during your first-year implementation phase and throughout your 5-year grant cycle. And again, Char should be or will be going through this during her training today. With regards to performance measures, again, with reading and math, you are ensuring that 100% of your programs are providing at least 2 hours of enrichment per week. And that includes some of the examples listed here, including lesson plans and shown on your program calendar. That's what we're going to be looking at in your documentation to see that you're meeting that measure. With family engagement, you are offering at least 3 evidence-based educational opportunities per year. This includes, for example, family literacy classes, working with one of your community partners to provide wraparound services, maybe a workshop on mental health and how to support your students in that space. Other community activities and documentation that we need to see here includes flyers or sign-in sheets or program schedule. Again, it needs to be clear that you're offering evidence-based educational development opportunities. Otherwise, your regional consultant will reach back out for clarification. Under program management, your program manager, you as the program manager, will need to meet monthly with your teacher, district, and/or building level leadership teams. This collaboration should be aligning with your school day efforts, and documentation includes meeting minutes and agenda. I talked about this before with the importance of partnerships, and we need to see that documentation showing that you are meeting consistently with your teacher, building, or district. And I say or because depending on your relationship with the district or in the district, if you're working there, you may not be attending all of these meetings, but depending on the level of the your relationship on the local level, that would determine, we just want to see that you are having these conversations on the local level in regards to your grant and sustaining the partnership. With license,
15 minutes.
thank
This
you.
is your 15-minute mark.
Thank you. With program management, licensing is only required for first year implementation only. So again, SHAR is going to be asking for that as part of you uploading. You'll be uploading information into the monitoring application under the first year implementation survey to show evidence that you have proper licensing in place. I know some of you have gotten email communication recently from Tabitha to confirm where you are with licensing. I think she's received and responded to most of those inquiries and is working on completing those providing those responses to you all. If you have any questions around licensing, specifically if you are in need of a youth development exemption moving forward, you should be contacting Tabitha. At this point, especially for those that have started programming already, you should have licensing in place or have provided an update on where you are with licensing. You should not be starting programming without licensing. Or if you are high school only, you're good. But everyone else that needs licensing should have that in place before you start. Nina mentioned having a certified teacher on staff. This is a grant requirement. You must have this person in place to review and approve lesson plans on a daily and weekly basis. And we need to see those actual lesson plans as part of that work and to align with who you have listed as your certified teacher. You know, we absolutely look at this and it is critical that you have this person in place. Personnel evaluation.
Charmaine, can you hold? I just want to make sure because there's a chat says, where is the slideshow? Can everyone see the slideshow by raising their reaction hand? Okay, so maybe there's one person that can't. Okay.
So everyone else can see it?
Okay, I can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. So again, or moving on to staffing and professional development. Oh, my apologies. Moving on to the next slide. With personnel evaluation, this must also align with your 21st century performance measures within your new application, approved application, or continuation plan. And to differentiate, I say new application, this is for those that are new FY22 grantees where you were just awarded a few months ago, and the continuation planner for those that are in years 2 through 5 of your grant cycle. And I apologize if I was not clear about that. So when I use those terms, that's what I mean. And so you should know that your internal evaluation process are aligning with those performance measures. And this includes us looking at your professional development plans for your staff. With programming, we need to see evidence of student choice and voice in your program implementation. This is critical. We talked about this earlier with Patty, how some of you all
Okay, from Chad, we have done student surveys in the past to capture this. Is an advisory board a requirement?
Nope, it's just best practice. Some programs have had their advisory boards in place, you know, because they're effective. If you find that doing, you know, involving your students' feedback is better done in a different way, then you do that. You do what you feel you need to. We just share that as an example. But traditionally, we see programs provide us documentation in the form of surveys or other creative ways that you find collecting or incorporating your students' voice in programming. So no, it's not a requirement, but we encourage whatever works for you or that can answer the question that you will need to upload the documentation for. Okay, so monitoring reminders, again, I stressed this before, performance measures should be the basis of everything created. We can't stress that enough. Many have already started programming, so we're encouraging you to review your approved new application and or continuation plans with your program staff as part of your onboarding or staff training so that everyone is on the same page as far as what your programming goals are that are housed within that document. And as a reminder, when even outside of us coming to see your program, your schedule should be posted throughout your programming space and school site so that others outside of the program that are not affiliated, such as teachers, administrators, can see what's going on for that week or month, just in case everyone, to make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay, monitoring updates. As stated this morning by Shannon in her announcements, and many of you may have already gotten the blog posting that Tabitha sent out not too long ago. We have moved to a more streamlined monitoring process based on our internal risk assessment. Grantees will only have an on-site visit during second, third, or fourth year grant cycle year. Again, this is unless your risk assessment shows you as medium or high risk, then you could have an additional site visit. Just for clarification, this year, all of our CAPA visits are primarily those that are in year 2. At this point, everyone else has had at least one during their grant cycle, so that should help. There are only a few that are having one due to not having a site visit in FY21. So to provide clarification there. Again, due to the uncertainty of COVID, CAPA visits will continue to be virtual. COSA will have a training to support you in this process, and we're going to share more about that in a little bit. And also, initial notification will come to your superintendent or executive director from a department designee. If your district or organization is a part of the department's collaborative monitoring review, which I will talk more about during my monitoring application training, or directly from your program, or directly to your program manager from your 21st Century Regional Consultant. We will go through again this in more detail during this year's training. To prepare for your first year implementation CAPA and or grant closeout survey process, again, towards the end of the month, the survey questions will be added to the blog. We are still working to finalize the monitoring application surveys for this year. I'm working internally with our developers, and we're looking at them being available by mid-October, with those surveys via PDF being added to the blog no later than the end of October. Again, as Nana stated, the deadline for documentation is 12/17/21. We encourage you, once you have access to the survey, whether it's in the monitoring application or through the PDFs that I mentioned, use that as part of your guide in preparing your documentation efforts. If you are comfortable with going into the application once the surveys are open, you are more than happy to, once we do get that clearance and we get through the training. And as a friendly reminder, once you begin this process, remember, I always say this every year, less is more, less is more. I literally say this every year in my training. Please only provide what we need to see. We don't need hundreds of documents per indicator. We want you to give us the best 1 or 2 documents to address what is being asked of you. And I actually made a note of that under each indicator this year. So you'll see where it says, provide 1, no more than 2. And that's what we're asking for. Please adhere to that. All these reminders will be contained in future email communications from our program office and details from your regional consultant. And with that, this year's monitoring application trainings will be held October 25th and 29th via Microsoft Teams. This is mandatory for program managers. And for some reason, if you aren't able to attend, please send a designee. These sessions will be repeated. They are not by region. They are by what works best for you. The registration link is now on the 21st Century Timeline if you have it through the blog. So if you go to the blog and click on where it says 21st Century Timeline, it'll take you to it. And then in that area where it says monitoring application trainings, you'll be able to click on the registration link. And I'll make sure to drop this in before the end of the training as well. All of our trainings this year will be virtual and recorded, and a blog post reminder will go out to remind you all to register. And if you have any questions about this training, please let me know. For those that are new, this application training will walk you through start to finish how to use this system to upload your documentation related to your first year implementation, your CAPA review, which you will have throughout your grant cycle at least once, and then your grant closeout survey. We're going to go through all of that during the training. So if you're not familiar, you're wondering what this is, that's what the training is for. So again, please reach out to me with any other questions. And as noted, COSA will be offering a training on best practices for success throughout your grant cycle, because there are various responsibilities that need to be completed throughout your grant cycle. This training will provide best practices and strategies to ensure that your grant requirements and goals are met. This will serve as a follow-up to the monitoring application trainings I just mentioned. Participation for these trainings, for COSA's quarterly trainings, are mandatory for all first-year programs and grant and program managers, and highly encouraged for those continuing programs. For fall 2022, all COSA trainings will be held virtually. The registration link is now open. You can find this on COSA's website and on the FY22 timeline that I just mentioned. If you have any questions, please contact Mark directly, and he's in the room if you have any questions about that. And that was a collaborative effort between Mark and myself. We felt that after going through last year's virtual CAPA visits, we felt that it was necessary to provide additional training and supports around how to better organize and be prepared for that, as well as other grant requirements throughout your grant cycle. So I hope you all enjoy that training, and looking forward to seeing you there as well. As I mentioned, here are some links to resources that you can utilize, which is in the PDF of this presentation. Again, some of those you can also find on the blog. And as always, let's stay connected. Here's my contact information. And for those that have questions about anything that was specified during this training, if you are a Northeast or Southwest grantee, I will be in touch with you. Or you can reach out to me with any questions about your grant. For those that have a CAPA review this year, your regional consultant will contact you directly with further information. We typically give you all a month after your start date before we really start to discuss any on-site reviews you may have, just to give you time to get settled into your program and to work with your staff on various things. So, and you will get plenty of notice once that information is sent out. So again, please reach out to me offline with any questions. And in the meantime, I would like to address any questions that you may have.